Subscribe to my YouTube channel, share it with your friends, and comment your thoughts. The clink of crystal glasses echoed softly throughout the opulent dining room. Each noise, each subtle movement, was amplified in the carefully crafted silence that surrounded the couple at table 12. The restaurant's chandeliers shimmered above them, casting a soft glow on the white linen and polished silverware. The table, set for two, was adorned with fresh roses in a crystal vase, their petals still holding the scent of the early morning dew. The air was rich with the soft hum of low conversations, the clattering of dishes, and the occasional laughter of well-dressed patrons who seemed to be enjoying their evening without a care in the world. But for this couple, it was a different story. Her eyes flickered nervously to her husband across the table, his features hidden behind a perfect mask of calm. He sat there, impeccably dressed, his dark suit tailored to fit him with sharp precision. His hair was neatly combed, his jawline squared and sharp, as it always was. There was something about him, his eyes, perhaps, that made her uneasy tonight. He was distant, not in the physical sense, but in a way that made her feel small and insignificant. It was as though she were speaking to a stranger, someone she barely recognized. She tried to smile, a feeble attempt to break the silence. But the smile faltered almost as soon as it appeared. "Are you sure everything's okay?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She didn't want to draw attention to herself in the high-end restaurant, but the tension between them was palpable. It had been building all night, ever since they had arrived. Her husband looked at her then, his lips curling slightly into a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. "Of course," he replied, but there was something about his tone that sent an icy shiver down her spine. It was too casual, too rehearsed. And that was what unsettled her the most. She had heard that tone many times before, when something was terribly wrong but he was too proud to admit it. Too proud to let anyone see the cracks. She took a deep breath, trying to ignore the knot tightening in her stomach. He wasn't one to show emotion. He kept everything under lock and key, even when it was obvious something was troubling him. But tonight, she felt like she had pushed him too far, and she didn't know how to fix it. The waiter arrived at their table, interrupting the silence, and began pouring wine into their glasses. She watched as the rich red liquid swirled into the crystal glass, the scent of oak and berries rising to meet her. It was supposed to be a celebration. A special night. Her husband had insisted on going to this 5-star restaurant, one of the most exclusive in the city. But something felt off. "I'll have the duck confit," she said, trying to steady her hands as she picked up the menu again, attempting to distract herself from the growing tension. Her fingers were trembling slightly. He had ordered the steak, as usual, but neither of them seemed particularly hungry tonight. They were simply going through the motions. As the waiter left, she felt his gaze on her, sharp and heavy. She looked up, meeting his eyes, and instantly felt a chill run through her veins. His stare was unwavering. It wasn't a look of affection, but of something darker. Something colder. "Is there something you want to tell me?" she asked, her voice firmer this time, more insistent. He said nothing at first, simply taking a slow sip from his glass, his eyes never leaving her. There was a quiet power in the way he held the glass, the way he turned it between his fingers, as if considering her question carefully. The seconds stretched on, and with each passing moment, the tension between them built. She felt as though the entire room had disappeared, and there was only the two of them. His presence loomed over her like a storm cloud, dark and oppressive. She could feel her heartbeat quicken, her chest tightening with unease. Finally, he spoke. "You never understand, do you?" His voice was low, his words deliberate, as if each one was weighed with years of frustration and silence. "You think this is all a game, don't you? You think everything will just fall into place like it always does." His words stung, more than she had expected. She opened her mouth to speak, to defend herself, but the words stuck in her throat. She hadn't known it would come to this. The evening had started so normally, so perfectly. But now, it felt like something was unraveling, something beyond her control. Something far worse than a simple disagreement. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said softly, but her words lacked conviction. She could feel it, the weight of his disapproval, his anger simmering beneath the surface. It was too late for explanations now, she realized. Whatever had been building between them had finally reached its boiling point. He stood up suddenly, knocking his chair back in the process. The sound echoed through the restaurant, drawing the attention of a few nearby diners. She froze, her breath caught in her throat. She had never seen him act like this, never seen him so unpredictable, so dangerous. Her heart pounded in her chest as she looked up at him, her body tense with fear. Without warning, he reached for the glass of wine in front of him, his movements swift and controlled. The next moment was a blur, everything seemed to happen in slow motion. He lifted the glass high, his hand shaking slightly, and then, in one swift motion, he threw the entire contents of the glass into her face. The wine splashed against her skin, the cold liquid soaking her dress, her hair, her skin. She gasped, blinking furiously as the wine stung her eyes. For a brief moment, she couldn't see, couldn't breathe. She could only feel. The cold, the wetness, the shock. The shock of what had just happened. The room fell silent. The music, the chatter, the clinking of glasses, all of it vanished in an instant. All that remained was the sound of her heavy breathing and the stunned gasps from the other patrons. Her mind raced, but nothing made sense. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. This wasn't the night they had planned. Her hands shook as she wiped her face with the napkin, the fabric useless against the stain of red wine that now covered her. She looked up at him, unable to process the anger that flickered in his eyes. He sat there, still, as if nothing had happened. His face was unreadable, cold. "Why?" she finally asked, her voice trembling. It was the only question that made sense. Why had he done this? What had pushed him to this point? His lips parted slightly, as though he were about to speak. But no words came. He simply stared at her, the intensity of his gaze making her feel as though she were suffocating. He was angry, but the anger wasn't what scared her most. It was the emptiness in his eyes, the complete absence of emotion, that sent a chill down her spine. I don't understand," she whispered, her voice shaking with confusion and fear. "What did I do wrong?" He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping harshly against the floor, and began walking toward the exit. She blinked, unsure of whether she should follow, whether she should say something, but before she could make up her mind, he was gone. The door swung shut behind him with a final, decisive thud. She sat there, stunned, her mind struggling to catch up with the events that had just unfolded. The waiter returned, offering apologies, but all she could do was stare at the door, the unanswered question hanging heavily in the air. What just happened? The silence in the restaurant felt suffocating now. No one seemed to know how to react. The evening had gone from fine dining to a dramatic, horrifying scene in the blink of an eye. But for her, it was just the beginning. The beginning of a night that would unravel everything she thought she knew about her husband, her marriage, and herself. She pushed her chair back slowly, her body numb, her thoughts racing. She needed to leave. She needed to find him. But she also knew, deep down, that this wasn't just some isolated incident. This was a moment that would haunt her forever. It was the beginning of something far more complicated, something dark and mysterious. Something that would change her life in ways she couldn't even begin to understand. The car sped through the streets, the tires humming against the pavement. Her heart was pounding in her chest, each beat quickening as the seconds dragged on. She barely remembered the drive home, her mind lost in a whirlwind of confusion, disbelief, and anger. What had just happened? It felt like a dream, an awful nightmare that she couldn't wake up from. She had been with him for years, married for 5. They had built a life together, a life that now seemed like a fragile illusion. She pulled into the driveway, the headlights of the car casting long shadows across the front lawn. The house loomed ahead, as it always had, its stately appearance hiding the cracks that had begun to appear in their marriage. It wasn't the house's fault, of course. The walls had nothing to do with what had just unfolded at the restaurant. It wasn't the house that had betrayed her, it was him. She sat in the car for a moment, staring blankly at the front door. Her hands trembled on the steering wheel. She didn't know what to do, or what to say. How could she face him after what had happened? After the wine, the silence, the look in his eyes? Her throat tightened as the flood of emotions threatened to overwhelm her. When she finally opened the car door, she stepped out and slowly walked to the front door, each step feeling heavier than the last. The house was eerily quiet, the silence broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves in the breeze. It was as if the world had stopped turning, holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. She reached for the door handle, her fingers stiff as they wrapped around the cold metal. The door swung open with a soft creak, revealing the dimly lit interior. The house was still, almost too still, as if frozen in time. The familiar scent of wood and leather filled the air, but today it felt different, there was something off about it. She stepped inside, her shoes clicking against the hardwood floor, the sound too loud in the silence. The living room was as immaculate as always, but tonight, it felt empty. The furniture, the art on the walls, the carefully arranged bookshelves, they all seemed to mock her, reminding her of the life they had built together. A life that felt like it had been ripped apart in a single moment. She dropped her purse onto the couch, her movements automatic. Her mind was still racing, her thoughts scattered. She needed answers. She needed to understand why he had done what he had done. But most of all, she needed to know if there was any way to fix it. Without thinking, she made her way upstairs to their bedroom, her footsteps echoing through the house. The door to the bedroom was slightly ajar, and she could hear the soft murmur of a television coming from inside. She stopped in the doorway, hesitating. There he was, sitting on the bed, his back turned to her, staring at the screen. He hadn't even looked up when she entered. "James," she called softly, her voice trembling. He didn't respond. She took a step into the room, the door closing behind her with a soft click. Her pulse quickened, her throat constricting. What was he thinking? What was he feeling? Did he even care about her anymore? "James, we need to talk," she said, her voice more forceful now. She needed him to face her, to acknowledge what had happened. Still, he didn't look at her. "I'm not going to pretend like nothing happened tonight," she continued, her hands balling into fists at her sides. "You can't just," her voice cracked, but she pushed through the wave of emotion. "You can't just throw wine in my face and expect me to pretend like everything is fine. I deserve an explanation." Finally, he turned to her, his expression unreadable. He didn't say anything for a long moment, his eyes cold and distant. He was still wearing the same suit from earlier, though it now looked disheveled, the collar of his shirt unbuttoned and loose. His tie hung around his neck like a noose, symbolizing the tension in the room. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he said quietly, his voice void of emotion. His words seemed rehearsed, as if he had been thinking about them for a long time. "You didn't mean to hurt me," she echoed, incredulous. "You threw wine in my face, James. You humiliated me in front of everyone at that restaurant. How could you say you didn't mean to hurt me?" "I never wanted this," he replied, his voice growing darker. "But sometimes, things have a way of getting out of control. I don't know how else to explain it." "Out of control?" she repeated, her voice rising. "What does that even mean? You've been distant for weeks, James. You've been shutting me out, avoiding me, and now this?" She threw her hands up in frustration. "I need answers. What's going on with you?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair, his fingers trembling slightly. She watched him closely, her eyes narrowing. He was hiding something. She could see it in the way his shoulders tensed, the way his jaw clenched. Whatever it was, it had been building for some time. "I'm sorry for what happened," he said, his voice strained. "But you wouldn't understand. I don't even understand it myself." Her heart skipped a beat. He didn't understand. That was the most unsettling thing he had said all night. "What do you mean, you don't understand?" she asked, stepping closer to him. "If you're not going to tell me what's really going on, then I can't just sit here pretending like everything's okay." He stood up suddenly, the motion so abrupt it startled her. He walked across the room, pausing by the window, looking out at the darkened yard below. His reflection in the glass looked like a stranger, someone she didn't recognize, someone she feared. "You don't know what it's like," he said quietly, almost to himself. "You don't know what I've been dealing with." The words hung in the air between them, thick with an unspoken truth. She felt a cold wave of dread wash over her. This wasn't just about a fight at a restaurant. This was bigger than that. Something was wrong, and whatever it was deep, something James had been keeping from her for a long time. "James," she said softly, her voice laced with concern, "please. I need to know. You don't have to do this alone. Whatever it is, we can work through it together." He turned slowly, his eyes locking with hers. There was a flash of vulnerability in his gaze, but it disappeared as quickly as it had come. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "But I can't." The words hit her like a physical blow. She had expected anger, frustration, maybe even guilt. But this? This resignation, this sense of defeat, left her feeling like she had been punched in the stomach. What did he mean? Why was he shutting her out? What was he hiding? "James, don't do this," she pleaded. "I can't help you if you don't let me in. We're supposed to be a team, remember?" He shook his head, his eyes downcast. "I don't deserve you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The weight of his words hung in the air, suffocating her. What had happened to the man she had married? The man who had promised to love her, to share his life with her? Why was he so broken now, so distant? Her chest tightened, her breath catching in her throat. She couldn't understand it. She couldn't understand him. "Please, James," she said again, her voice trembling. "Tell me what's going on. What are you hiding from me?" But instead of answering, he turned away, walking toward the door. "I need to be alone," he said quietly, before disappearing into the hallway. She stood there, frozen, her heart racing, her mind reeling. She had thought the night would end with an explanation, with closure. But now, it felt like the beginning of something much darker. And she realized, with a sinking feeling, that she was no longer sure if she wanted to know the truth. The truth was something she might never be able to come back from. The morning after was no better. The house was still eerily quiet. She sat at the kitchen table, a mug of coffee in front of her, untouched. Her mind was consumed by the events of the previous evening. The wine, his cold demeanor, the way he had left without so much as a word of explanation. He had shut himself off completely, disappearing into the shadows of their home like a ghost. She couldn't understand it. He had always been the man she had known, the man who had promised her forever, who had stood by her side in the hardest of times. Yet now, it was as if a stranger stood in his place, someone cold, distant, and unpredictable. Her phone buzzed on the table, breaking her train of thought. It was a message from her best friend, Emma. "How are you doing? I was worried when I didn't hear from you last night. Call me when you can." She stared at the message for a few moments before tapping the screen and typing a quick response. "I'm fine. Just, a lot to process. I'll call later." That was the truth, wasn't it? There was so much to process. But she had no idea where to even begin. The silence stretched on, growing more oppressive with each passing minute. She hadn't seen James since the night before. She had tried to approach him, to find him in the house, but he had shut himself away in the study. The door locked. It felt like he was deliberately keeping her out, deliberately keeping her in the dark. She had tried knocking, but all she received was silence in return. It was as though the man she knew had vanished into thin air. Her eyes wandered to the stack of unopened mail on the counter. She reached for it absently, her fingers trembling as she rifled through the bills and advertisements. One envelope, however, caught her eye. It was a thick, cream-colored envelope with no return address. The paper felt expensive, and the handwriting on the front was elegant, almost too formal. Her breath hitched as she turned it over, the seal still intact. She didn't recognize the name on the front. "James," she whispered under her breath. But she quickly brushed the thought aside. It couldn't be for him. She hadn't seen anything like this in their mailbox before. Her curiosity gnawed at her. She had never been one to snoop, but something about the envelope felt important, urgent, almost. Her fingers itched to tear it open. Before she could stop herself, she used the edge of a butter knife to gently break the seal. She unfolded the letter with trembling hands and began to read. Her eyes moved quickly over the words, and the more she read, the more her stomach twisted in knots. "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Stone, we are writing to inform you of a matter that requires your immediate attention. We understand that this may come as a shock, but it is imperative that you and your husband come to our office as soon as possible. There are issues regarding your financial investments that must be addressed. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience to arrange a meeting. Sincerely, Gordon and Whitley Financial Advisors." The letter was brief, but it left her with more questions than answers. Financial investments? What could that possibly mean? She thought she knew their finances. She had always been involved, managing the household accounts and ensuring everything was in order. So why had she never heard of Gordon and Whitley Financial Advisors? And why was it such a pressing matter that it couldn't be addressed over the phone? A chill ran down her spine. She felt an unsettling sense of dread creeping over her. What was James involved in? What was he hiding from her? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the front door opening. She stood quickly, heart racing, expecting James to walk in. But when she rounded the corner, it wasn't him. It was Emma. "Hey," Emma said gently, her face filled with concern. "I know you said you were fine, but I can see that you're not. What happened last night?" She didn't even try to hold back the tears anymore. They came in a rush, spilling down her cheeks as she walked toward Emma and collapsed into her arms. "Emma, I don't know what to do," she sobbed, her voice thick with emotion. "James, he's not the same. I don't know who he is anymore. Last night, he threw wine in my face, and then he just left. He won't even talk to me. He's hiding something, and I don't know what it is." Emma stroked her back, murmuring soft reassurances. "It's okay, it's okay. You don't have to go through this alone. Something's wrong. I know it. I don't know what to do. And now there's this letter, Emma." She pulled the envelope from the counter, showing it to her friend. "Gordon and Whitley Financial Advisors. I've never heard of them. But why didn't he tell me about them? Why didn't he mention any of this? This doesn't make sense." Emma took the letter, reading it quickly, her brow furrowing. "That's strange. I mean, you'd think he would have talked to you about it, right?" "Exactly," she said, wiping her eyes. "But now, I don't even know if I can trust him. I don't know if I ever could. What if he's been lying to me this whole time?" Emma sat down at the kitchen table, motioning for her to join her. "Okay, first things first. We need to figure out what's going on. But you can't do it alone. I'm here for you. We'll figure it out together, okay? She nodded, though doubt still lingered in her chest. Was she truly ready to confront James? Was she ready to face whatever secrets he had been keeping from her? I'll talk to him, she said finally, her voice quiet but determined. I need to. I need to know the truth. Even if it breaks me. Emma reached out, grabbing her hand. I'll be with you every step of the way. The rest of the day passed in a blur. She couldn't focus on anything, her thoughts consumed by James and the secrets that were starting to pile up around her. She had tried calling him, but his phone went straight to voicemail every time. It was clear he wasn't coming home anytime soon, and that only made her feel more desperate. As evening settled over the house, she couldn't wait any longer. She had to find him. She couldn't stay here in this suffocating silence, waiting for him to come back and tell her what was going on. She couldn't just sit there and let him lie to her. She needed to confront him. And she would do whatever it took to get the truth. She arrived at his office an hour later, her heart in her throat. She stood in front of the imposing glass building, staring up at the tall windows, feeling smaller than she ever had before. It was a strange sensation, knowing that everything she thought she knew about her husband, about their life together, might not be true. Inside, she was met with a receptionist who seemed a bit too cheerful for the situation. "How can I help you today?" the receptionist asked. "I'm looking for James Stone." "He's supposed to be here for a meeting," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos in her mind. The receptionist's smile faltered for a moment, and she looked down at her computer screen. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but Mr. Stone is not here today. We haven't received any word from him." Her stomach dropped. This wasn't making sense. He hadn't told her he was coming here. He hadn't said a word about any meeting. "Are you sure?" "He's supposed to be here," she said, her voice rising slightly. The receptionist nodded, but something about the situation felt off. She turned away, a tight knot forming in her chest. She had to find him. She had to know where he was and why he had been avoiding her. As she left the building, her mind raced with questions. Where was James? Why had he lied to her about the meeting? What was he hiding? The following days were a blur of sleepless nights and unanswered questions. Her mind refused to stop worrying, spinning with fragments of thoughts and moments that had been left unfinished, dangling in the air. She couldn't shake the image of the letter from Gordon and Whitley, and she certainly couldn't forget how James had completely shut her out. It was as though the man she had known for years had been replaced by a stranger. The house felt colder now, emptier. She wandered through the rooms, touching things, his jacket hanging on the chair, the glass of water on his nightstand, the half-open book on the coffee table, and each time, it felt like a lie. How could everything be so normal when everything around her was falling apart? The life they had built felt like it was built on a shaky foundation, and now that foundation was beginning to crumble. Emma had checked in on her several times, always reassuring her that she wasn't alone. But the truth was, she was alone. James had been gone for days. She had no idea where he had gone, what he was doing, or who he was with. The silence between them was deafening. Every text she sent went unanswered, every phone call went straight to voicemail. She had spent the last few days trying to piece together whatever she could. But the more she dug, the deeper the mystery seemed to go. The letter from Gordon and Whitley still sat on the kitchen counter, unopened since that afternoon. It was the only lead she had, but it felt like nothing more than an obstacle to understanding the truth. Why hadn't he told her about it? Why hadn't he let her in? She couldn't understand why he was keeping things from her. Was it about money? About their future? Was there something more sinister at play? Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door. She jumped, startled by the sudden noise in the otherwise silent house. She wasn't expecting anyone, and her first thought was that it was James. Her heart leapt at the thought, but when she opened the door, she was met with a stranger. A man stood on her doorstep, dressed in a dark suit, a briefcase in hand. He had the look of someone who was used to getting things done, his posture was straight, his expression serious. He was older, perhaps in his mid-40s, with short-cropped hair and a face that seemed to carry a weight of its own. There was something about him that made her uneasy immediately. "Can I help you?" she asked, trying to hide the confusion and wariness in her voice. "I'm looking for Mrs. Stone," the man said, his voice firm and respectful, but there was an underlying tension in it. "That's me," she replied, her voice faltering slightly. "Who are you?" "My name is Thomas Craig," the man said, offering a hand. "I'm a private investigator. I've been hired by your husband." She stared at him, speechless for a moment. A private investigator? Her thoughts raced, trying to piece together what this could mean. Had James been in some kind of trouble? Was this the explanation she had been searching for? "Private investigator," she finally asked, shaking his hand. "What for?" "I'm afraid I can't go into details," he said. "But your husband has asked me to help him with a matter of some urgency. It's about his financial situation." Her heart skipped a beat. This was it. This was the answer to the letter. But it was nothing like she had imagined. "James," she said, her voice trembling. "Why hasn't he told me about this? What's going on?" Thomas Craig's expression remained neutral. "Mrs. Stone, I'm afraid I can't share any specifics. I'm here because your husband requested it. I have some information that might be relevant, but I would recommend speaking to your husband directly. He has requested that I not involve you in the matter until it's absolutely necessary." "Necessary?" she repeated, her mind spinning. She had never heard of anything like this before. Why would James keep something so important from her? Was he in trouble? What was going on? "Please, if you would allow me to speak with your husband," Thomas Craig said, his voice softening slightly. "There are things that need to be addressed." She felt a surge of frustration rise in her chest. "I haven't seen him in days. I don't know where he is. He won't talk to me." Thomas Craig seemed to consider this for a moment before nodding. "I understand. In that case, I'll leave you my card. If you do hear from him, please let me know. I'll be happy to assist." He handed her a business card, and she took it numbly, her hands still trembling. The card was simple, with only a name, a phone number, and a website. No address. No personal details. It seemed like something out of a movie. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Thomas Craig nodded and turned to leave. "Good luck, Mrs. Stone. I hope you get the answers you're looking for." She closed the door behind him, still standing there, her mind racing. Private investigator. Financial troubles. What was happening to her life? What was going on with James? The answers were slipping through her fingers, just out of reach. That evening, she decided to take matters into her own hands. She couldn't keep waiting for James to come back or for answers to fall into her lap. She needed to confront him, once and for all. She wasn't going to sit by any longer, wondering if she was married to a stranger. She left the house, driving aimlessly at first, her thoughts consumed by everything she had learned. The more she thought about it, the more she realized how little she actually knew about her husband's life. How little she had ever questioned the things he had kept from her. It wasn't just the financial matters, there were other things. The way he had always been so closed off, so secretive about his past. The way he had refused to talk about anything that didn't fit into the perfect, glossy picture he had painted of their life together. As she pulled into the parking lot of the office building where Thomas Craig had said he worked, her stomach twisted with dread. What was she about to uncover? Was she ready to face the truth, no matter how ugly it might be? The building was tall, imposing, with tinted windows that reflected the fading light of the evening sky. She could already feel the weight of what was coming, pressing on her chest. She walked through the lobby, her heels clicking sharply against the polished marble floor. Her footsteps echoed in the empty space, amplifying the feeling of isolation that had consumed her in recent days. When she reached the receptionist, the woman behind the desk greeted her with a polite but distant smile. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I'm here to see Thomas Craig," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. The receptionist's smile faltered, and she glanced down at her computer. "Mr. Craig is expecting you. Please have a seat." Minutes passed before she was ushered into an office at the end of the hallway. The door opened, revealing Thomas Craig sitting behind a large wooden desk, his expression calm but unreadable. The walls of the office were lined with bookshelves filled with legal documents, photos, and dark wood paneling. He gestured for her to sit, and she did, her mind racing. There was so much she wanted to ask, so much she needed to know, but the questions stuck in her throat. "Mrs. Stone," Thomas Craig said, his voice low. "I'm afraid this is a difficult situation. Your husband is involved in something dangerous. He's been keeping secrets from you, and I think it's time you knew the truth." Her heart hammered in her chest. This was it. The truth she had been waiting for. But could she handle it? Could she bear what was about to be revealed? The air in Thomas Craig's office felt thick with tension as she sat across from him. Her heart raced in her chest, each beat deafening in the otherwise quiet room. She hadn't spoken a word yet, unable to form the questions she needed to ask. The weight of the moment pressed down on her. This was the point of no return. She was about to learn the truth. She could feel it in the pit of her stomach. Thomas Craig leaned forward slightly, his hands folded on the desk in front of him. His eyes were steady, unwavering as he watched her, almost as though he were assessing her reaction before continuing. "Mrs. Stone," he began. His voice calm but carrying a certain weight. "What I'm about to tell you isn't easy, but I think you need to hear it. Your husband has been involved in some very serious financial matters. And I'm not just talking about investments or business dealings. It goes far deeper than that." She swallowed hard, her throat dry. "What do you mean? What kind of matters?" Her voice came out quieter than she intended, but the uncertainty in her chest threatened to choke her. Thomas looked away for a moment, gathering his thoughts. She could sense the hesitation in him, the reluctance to speak the full truth. But why? What was so dangerous about what he had uncovered? "It's more than just bad investments. James has gotten involved in some illegal activities," he said, his words sharp, as though they were not easy for him to say either. Her heart skipped a beat. Illegal activities? The words hung in the air like an echo, vibrating through the silence of the office. "I don't know all the details," Thomas continued, his expression becoming more somber. "But I've been hired to investigate a series of financial crimes he's connected to. These include money laundering, fraud, and connections to people you wouldn't want to know about." The room felt like it was closing in around her, the walls pressing in on her as she processed the information. It was as if her entire world had just been turned upside down. James, the man she had loved, the man she had trusted, was involved in criminal activities. How could this be possible? She felt like she was suffocating under the weight of it all. "Why didn't he tell me about this?" she asked, her voice breaking as the question left her lips. She was desperate for an answer, desperate to make sense of everything. "Why would he keep something like this from me?" Thomas leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving hers. "I can't speak for your husband, Mrs. Stone. But from what I've gathered, he didn't want to involve you. He didn't want you to know, to be dragged into whatever mess he's gotten himself into. And I think that's why he's been avoiding you. He's trying to protect you, in his own way, by keeping you in the dark." Her mind whirled. Protect her? This wasn't protection. This was deceit. He had been lying to her for months, keeping things from her that should have been shared. How could he think that hiding the truth from her would somehow keep her safe? "But this is too big, isn't it?" she said, almost to herself, shaking her head in disbelief. This is more than just bad decisions. What kind of person does this to the people they love? Thomas didn't answer right away. He stared at her, his expression solemn. After a long pause, he finally spoke. People get involved in these things for many reasons. Sometimes it's about desperation. Other times it's about power, greed. I don't know James' full story. But I know he's in deep, and he's tried to protect you from it. And now, he's in a position where there's no going back. Her head was spinning. Her thoughts were fragmented, each piece not quite fitting into the puzzle. She had trusted James. She had given him everything, but now it seemed like everything had been a lie. How could she have missed the signs? Was she really that blind? Where is he? She asked, her voice now filled with an urgency she hadn't felt before. I need to talk to him. I need to understand what's going on, what he's involved in. I don't know, Thomas said, shaking his head slightly. I've been trying to reach him myself. But it's been difficult. I think he's gone into hiding. He knows that people are after him. And that's why I think you need to be careful, Mrs. Stone. This situation is dangerous. There are people involved in this that you do not want to cross. The warning hung in the air like a threat. She could feel the coldness of his words seeping into her bones. People were after James. People who would do anything to protect their interests, no matter who got hurt in the process. But why would he go into hiding? Why wouldn't he come to me? She asked, a lump forming in her throat. I'm his wife. He should trust me enough to tell me what's going on. He probably does trust you, Thomas said, his voice softening just a little. But the reality is that he's been living a double life. And now, everything's crashing down around him. He's not the man you think he is, Mrs. Stone. And maybe that's why he's kept you at a distance. He didn't want you to get caught in the crossfire. The words cut through her like a blade. She could feel herself unraveling. The man she thought she knew, the man she had built a life with, was nothing like she had imagined. She had been so blind, so consumed by the image of their perfect life, that she had never seen the cracks forming underneath. How could he do this to me? She whispered, more to herself than to Thomas. People make choices, Thomas replied, his voice still calm but tinged with sadness. Sometimes they make choices they regret. But at this point, Mrs. Stone, it's about survival. Your husband is in danger, and so are you. If you want to find him, you need to be prepared. This is no longer just about your marriage. It's about something much bigger than both of you. She sat back in the chair, her mind racing. Survival. Danger. She wasn't sure what to believe anymore. But there was one thing she knew for certain, she needed to find James. She couldn't let him go down this path alone. Even if he had kept secrets from her, even if he had betrayed her trust, he was still the man she had married. And she couldn't just turn her back on him. How do I find him? She asked, her voice trembling but determined. What do I need to do? Thomas paused for a long moment, as if weighing his next words carefully. You'll need to be discreet. There are people who are watching him, people who know he's trying to disappear. I've been tracking some of his movements, but he's been careful. If you're serious about finding him, I can help. But I warn you, this won't be easy. It's not going to be a simple search. You'll have to dig deep, and you'll have to be prepared for the consequences. She nodded, feeling the weight of his words settle in her chest. She wasn't ready for this. She wasn't prepared for the dangerous road ahead. But she couldn't back down now. She had to know the truth. She had to find James, even if it meant risking everything she had left. Let's do it, she said, her voice stronger now, filled with resolve. I need to find him. I need to know why he did this. And I need to bring him home. Thomas Craig regarded her with a long, silent look, as though assessing her strength. Then he nodded. All right. We'll start looking. But remember, Mrs. Stone, this isn't just a matter of finding your husband. This is a matter of survival. If you want to do this, you need to be prepared for whatever comes next. She took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. There was no turning back now. The truth had already begun to unravel, and there was no stopping it. The road ahead would be dangerous, but she was ready to face it. As she left the office, she couldn't shake the feeling that her life had changed irrevocably. The man she loved, the man she thought she knew, was tangled up in something far darker than she could have ever imagined. And now, she was in it too. The search for the truth was just beginning. The sun had barely risen, casting a pale light through the blinds of her bedroom. It had been days since her meeting with Thomas Craig, and every minute since then had felt like an eternity. She had spent the last several days digging into the secrets James had been hiding, each new discovery darker than the last. Her every thought was consumed with the questions of what he had done, why he had done it, and how she could ever trust him again. But still, she had to find him. There was no turning back now. She grabbed her phone from the nightstand, her fingers trembling as she unlocked it. There was a new message from Thomas. I've found something. It's not good. Meet me at the usual place. 10 a.m. Her pulse quickened. This was it. She could feel the weight of the message pressing down on her. She had been waiting for a breakthrough, hoping for an answer, some kind of clue that would help her understand what was going on. But something in her gut told her that what Thomas had found wouldn't be good news. She threw on a jacket, grabbed her keys, and left the house without another thought. The streets outside were empty, the silence of the early morning unsettling. She drove in a daze, her mind racing, her heart pounding with every mile. She had to know the truth, no matter the cost. Thomas had asked her to meet him at a cafe on the edge of town. It was a small, quiet place, the kind of place that people who wanted to keep their conversations private would go. As she pulled into the parking lot, she saw Thomas standing outside, his posture rigid, his eyes scanning the surroundings. When he saw her, he gave a short nod and walked toward her. She stepped out of the car, her legs feeling weak. Her thoughts were a blur of confusion and fear. What had he found? What new horrors was he about to reveal? Mrs. Stone, Thomas greeted her, his voice low and serious. I think we need to talk. She nodded, swallowing hard. What is it? What did you find? I'm afraid it's not good news, Thomas said, his face grim. He led her to a small table outside, where they sat, the air between them thick with anticipation. I've been following James' trail, and it's worse than I thought. He's been connected to some dangerous people, people who will stop at nothing to protect their interests. Her heart sank. What kind of people? Thomas leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. The kind of people who don't leave loose ends. The kind of people who take out anyone who poses a threat to them. And right now, your husband is a threat to them. He's trying to get away, but these people are looking for him. They won't stop until they find him. She felt a cold shiver run down her spine. Is James? Is he in danger? Thomas nodded slowly. Yes. And so are you. The words hit her like a punch to the gut. She had been living in a fog of confusion and disbelief, but now the reality of the situation hit her with full force. James wasn't just hiding from her, he was hiding from people who could hurt him, and hurt her. You have to understand, Thomas continued, his eyes darkening, this isn't just about money. This is about power. James got involved in something far bigger than himself, and now it's spiraled out of control. He's trying to break free, but the people he's tangled with won't let him go so easily. She clenched her fists, her mind racing with thoughts of how this all had happened. How had she not seen the signs? How had she been so blind to the truth? How do you know all this? She asked, her voice shaking. I've been working on this case for a while now. I've spoken to people who know the players involved. James may not have wanted you to know, but the truth is, he was always going to get caught up in this. The question now is whether he's strong enough to get out, or if he'll be dragged down with them. The weight of his words settled over her like a suffocating blanket. She had no idea where to go from here. The man she loved had been living a double life, and now he was caught in a dangerous game where there were no winners. I need to find him, she said, her voice firm, though the tremor of fear still lingered. I need to talk to him. I need to know why he didn't tell me all of this. Thomas hesitated. I can help you find him. But you need to understand the risks. If we go looking for James, we're walking into a dangerous situation. These people won't hesitate to hurt anyone who gets in their way, and I'm not sure you're ready for that. I don't care, she replied, her voice stronger now. I have to find him. He's my husband. I need to know the truth. Thomas studied her for a moment, then nodded. All right. I'll help you. But we need to move quickly. The longer we wait, the more dangerous it becomes. She felt a rush of determination. This wasn't just about finding James. This was about confronting the truth, about reclaiming her life and her sense of control. She couldn't let him keep running. She couldn't let these people destroy him, or her. The next few hours were a whirlwind of information, tracking down leads, and piecing together fragments of James' life that she had never seen before. Every step brought her closer to understanding just how deep James' involvement ran, and how much danger they were both in. Eventually, Thomas led her to a small, inconspicuous building on the outskirts of town. It looked like any other warehouse, but something about it felt off. The air was thick with tension, and every instinct inside her screamed that this was where she would find James. This is it, Thomas said quietly. Be careful. Don't let anyone see you. They approached the warehouse cautiously, staying out of sight as much as possible. As they neared the entrance, she could hear muffled voices from inside. It sounded like a heated conversation, but she couldn't make out the words. Her breath hitched. This was it. This was where everything would be revealed. They waited for a moment, and then Thomas pushed open a side door, signaling for her to follow. They crept inside, the dim light from a single bulb casting long shadows on the concrete floor. Suddenly, a voice called out from the shadows. You shouldn't have come here. She froze. The voice was unmistakable. It was James. Her heart leaped into her throat as she turned to see him step into the light. His face was gaunt, his clothes disheveled, and his eyes were filled with a mixture of relief and regret. He looked like a man who had been running for far too long. James, she whispered, her voice breaking. I've been looking for you. I need to know what's going on. Why didn't you tell me? He looked at her for a long moment, and she could see the internal struggle on his face. Finally, he spoke, his voice rough. I never wanted you to get involved in this. I never wanted you to see me like this. But the truth is, I've made mistakes. I got in over my head, and now I don't know how to get out. Tears welled up in her eyes. You should have trusted me, she whispered, her voice filled with pain. We could have faced this together. I know, he said, his voice thick with emotion. But I didn't think I could protect you. I didn't think I could keep you safe. She took a step toward him, reaching out for him. James, you don't have to do this alone anymore. We'll figure this out. We'll find a way out of this mess together. But before he could answer, a loud crash echoed through the warehouse, followed by the sound of footsteps approaching. James' face turned pale. They're here, he whispered. The danger was closing in. There was no turning back now.